My girlfriend kept one huge secret. The happiest day of my life turned into the day everything I believed about love shattered. I thought I knew the woman I wanted to spend forever with. I thought there were no secrets left between us. But a single envelope, hidden in the back of an old wooden drawer, revealed a truth that changed my entire life. The woman I loved had been carrying one enormous secret for years, and when I finally discovered it, I wasn't sure whether my heart would break forever or learn to love in a way I never imagined possible. Before we continue, if you believe kindness, forgiveness, and second chances can change lives, please take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to Tales Maybe. Your support helps us continue sharing heartfelt stories that remind us how powerful love can truly be. The morning sun spread soft golden light across the city as people hurried toward their jobs, cafes opened their doors, and children laughed while walking to school. It was one of those beautiful mornings that made the world seem peaceful. I had every reason to smile because in just 3 weeks, I was supposed to marry the woman who had completely transformed my life. My name is Adrian Mercer, and for almost 4 years, my world had revolved around one person, Nora Whitmore. She wasn't the loudest person in any room, nor the kind who constantly searched for attention. She carried herself with quiet confidence and possessed a kindness that seemed almost impossible in today's world. She volunteered at local shelters on weekends, remembered birthdays that everyone else forgot, and somehow managed to make strangers feel like they mattered. When I first met Nora at a neighborhood charity book fair, I had been struggling to rebuild my life after losing my father unexpectedly. Grief had turned me into someone I barely recognized. I kept everyone at a distance, believing that caring deeply only guaranteed more pain. Nora never forced her way into my life. She simply stayed close enough for me to realize that some people don't leave when life becomes difficult. Slowly, the walls around my heart began to disappear. Weekend coffee became afternoon walks through city parks. Those walks turned into road trips, shared dreams, and eventually a small apartment where laughter echoed through every room. Every ordinary day felt extraordinary simply because she was there. There was only one thing about Nora that had always puzzled me. Every year, without fail, she disappeared for one entire weekend. She never explained where she went. She always smiled gently and promised she would tell me someday. I respected her privacy because everyone deserved pieces of their lives that belonged only to them. Trust wasn't built by demanding answers. It was built by believing someone would share them when they were ready. At least, that was what I believed. As our wedding approached, excitement filled every corner of our apartment. Boxes of decorations stood against the walls. Invitations had been mailed weeks earlier. Friends constantly called to ask if we needed help. Even my mother, who had spent years worrying that I would never love again after losing my father, looked happier than I had seen her in a decade. Everything felt perfect. Until one ordinary Tuesday morning. Nora had left early for work after accidentally forgetting an important folder containing some wedding paperwork. She called me during my lunch break and asked if I could look for it inside her old wooden writing desk. I smiled, thinking nothing of it. The desk had always been hers. I rarely opened its drawers except when she specifically asked. I searched carefully through neatly organized files, notebooks, and greeting cards. Then one drawer refused to close properly. Thinking something was stuck behind it, I gently pulled the drawer completely out. Behind it rested a thick cream-colored envelope covered in dust. My name was written across the front in Nora's unmistakable handwriting. There was no date. No explanation. Only 3 words. For Adrian. My hands froze. Something inside me whispered that I shouldn't open it. Another voice insisted that if she had written my name, perhaps she had intended me to read it someday. After several long moments, curiosity defeated hesitation. Inside rested dozens of photographs. Every picture showed Nora. But she wasn't alone. Standing beside her was a little girl no older than 6 years old. The child had bright brown eyes identical to Nora's and the same gentle smile. Some photographs showed birthday parties. Others showed trips to the zoo. Several captured ordinary afternoons in playgrounds. One picture stopped my heart completely. The little girl held a handmade card that read, "Best mommy ever." I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred as my heartbeat pounded inside my ears. Mommy. The word echoed over and over inside my head. Had Nora hidden a child from me? How could someone keep something so enormous secret for 4 years? Questions flooded my mind faster than I could process them. Had she been married? Was the child's father still alive? Did everyone know except me? Had our entire relationship been built on lies? Beneath the photographs rested several hospital documents and folded letters tied together with a faded blue ribbon. I wanted to keep reading. I wanted answers. But another part of me felt guilty for invading something she clearly hadn't been ready to share. I carefully returned everything exactly as I had found it and delivered the forgotten folder to her office without mentioning a single word. When Nora greeted me downstairs, her smile was exactly the same as always. Warm. Gentle. Completely unaware that my world had just shifted beneath my feet. For the rest of the afternoon, I struggled to focus on work. Every memory from the last 4 years suddenly seemed different. Every unexplained weekend. Every emotional moment when children ran toward her in parks. Every birthday she insisted on spending away from everyone. The pieces no longer looked random. They looked connected. That evening we cooked dinner together while soft sunlight filled our apartment. She laughed at one of my terrible cooking mistakes just as she always did. She asked about my day. She talked excitedly about flower arrangements for our wedding. I answered politely, but my mind remained trapped inside that dusty envelope. I hated myself for doubting her. Yet I couldn't ignore what I had seen. Love depends on trust. Secrets weaken trust. And this wasn't a small secret. This was an entirely hidden life. That night sleep refused to come. I watched moonlight drift across our bedroom ceiling while Nora slept peacefully beside me. I wondered whether the woman beside me was exactly who I believed she was, or someone I had never truly known. The next morning, instead of going directly to work, I drove aimlessly through quiet streets, hoping fresh air would organize the storm inside my head. Instead, memories returned. There had been countless tiny moments I'd ignored. She often became emotional whenever she saw mothers holding their daughters. She always donated children's clothes anonymously during the holidays. She sometimes stared silently at old family photographs before quietly putting them away. At the time, I believed those moments reflected compassion. Now they felt like hidden pain. Days passed, and pretending everything was normal became almost impossible. The weight inside my chest grew heavier every hour. I wasn't angry. Not completely. I was hurt. Because I had shared every painful chapter of my own life with Nora. I had trusted her with every scar. Yet somewhere inside her heart, she had built a locked room I had never been allowed to enter. Finally, Saturday arrived. It was the same weekend every year when Nora quietly packed a small travel bag. She hugged me a little longer than usual before leaving. As I watched her car disappear down the bright, sunlit street, I made a decision I never imagined I would make. I followed her. The road stretched beyond the city into peaceful countryside covered with green fields and blooming wildflowers. Nearly 2 hours later, Nora stopped near a small children's rehabilitation center surrounded by gardens full of colorful roses and tall oak trees. I parked several hundred feet away. From a distance, I saw something that made my heart stop once again. A little girl, perhaps 8 years old now, ran across the garden as fast as she could. The moment she reached Nora, she wrapped both arms around her. Nora dropped to her knees, held the little girl tightly, and cried with a smile so full of love that it was impossible to mistake what I was witnessing. For the first time since finding that envelope, I understood one thing with absolute certainty. The greatest secret of the woman I loved wasn't hidden because she was ashamed. It was hidden because carrying it had broken her heart every single day. If this story is touching your heart so far, stay with us. Sometimes the biggest secrets aren't born from betrayal, they're born from sacrifice. Adrian stood beneath the shade of a large maple tree, hidden just far enough away that neither Nora nor the little girl noticed him. The warm afternoon breeze carried the sound of laughter through the rehabilitation center's peaceful gardens, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. The child looked healthier than the photographs had suggested, but she still moved carefully, as if every step required a little more effort than most children her age. Nora held her hand as they wandered along a flower-lined path, occasionally kneeling to wipe away the girl's tears or straighten her sun hat. There was a tenderness in every movement that no one could fake. It was the kind of love that existed long before words could ever describe it. Adrian had spent days convincing himself that perhaps there was another explanation, but the sight before him left no room for denial. Nora loved that little girl with all her heart. His first instinct was to leave before Nora noticed him. He felt like an intruder standing in the middle of someone else's private world. Yet another part of him knew he couldn't continue living with unanswered questions. Taking a slow breath, he stepped onto the garden pathway. Nora looked up, and the color immediately drained from her face. The smile she had worn only seconds earlier disappeared, replaced by fear unlike anything Adrian had ever seen in her eyes. She looked not like someone who had been caught lying, but like someone who had spent years trying to protect the people she loved from a painful truth. The little girl glanced curiously between them before a cheerful nurse gently invited her inside for an afternoon art activity. As soon as the child disappeared into the building, silence surrounded Adrian and Nora. Neither of them spoke for what felt like forever. The sunlight filtered through the trees while birds sang overhead, creating a peaceful scene that felt strangely out of place against the storm building inside both their hearts. Finally, Nora closed her eyes for a brief moment and whispered that she had always known this day would come. She admitted she had wanted to tell Adrian countless times, especially after he proposed, but every attempt ended with fear winning the battle. She believed that once he learned the truth, he would look at her differently. She feared he would see her as dishonest instead of broken. She feared he would walk away, just as so many others already had. Adrian quietly asked only one question. He wanted to know who the little girl really was. Nora's eyes filled with tears before she answered. The little girl's name was Eliana. She was her daughter. Years before meeting Adrian, Nora had fallen deeply in love with a young firefighter named Mason Caldwell. They had dreamed about building a family together and spent years saving money for a small house outside the city. Their dreams came true when Eliana was born, but happiness lasted only 14 months. Mason lost his life while helping rescue a family trapped inside a burning apartment building. Overnight, Nora became a grieving widow and a single mother to a baby who had inherited a rare genetic blood disorder requiring constant treatment. The next several years became a never-ending cycle of hospitals, medical bills, and impossible decisions. Nora worked 2 jobs while sleeping only a few hours each night. She sold almost everything she owned to pay for treatments insurance refused to cover. There were days when she skipped meals so Eliana would never go without medicine. Friends slowly disappeared because they didn't know how to help. Family members tried at first but eventually became overwhelmed by the emotional and financial burden. One by one, the people she counted on quietly drifted away. Then came the hardest decision of her life. Doctors recommended that Eliana receive long-term care at one of the country's best pediatric rehabilitation centers. The facility specialized in children with complex illnesses and provided treatment Nora could never afford on her own. The center operated through charitable foundations that covered nearly every expense, but there was one heartbreaking condition. Children receiving full-time treatment needed stable, uninterrupted medical supervision. Parents could visit freely but could not remove them from the program until doctors believed they were strong enough to live at home again. Signing those papers felt, to Nora, like giving away her own heart. Every month she questioned whether she had made the right decision. Every birthday she cried herself to sleep after returning to an empty apartment. Every holiday she baked Eliana's favorite cookies, carried them to the center, and smiled through tears so her daughter would never feel guilty for being sick. When Adrian entered her life, she believed happiness had finally found her again. For the first time in years, someone made her laugh without forcing it. Someone looked beyond her exhaustion and saw hope instead. She wanted desperately to tell him everything. More than once she even wrote letters explaining the truth. The envelope Adrian had discovered was only one of many attempts she never found the courage to give him. She confessed that she had listened to countless stories about people whose relationships ended the moment children from previous marriages entered the picture. She convinced herself that Adrian deserved a fresh start, free from the weight of hospitals, uncertainty, and lifelong medical responsibilities. She loved him so much that she chose silence, believing it was the only way to protect the future they had built together. Adrian felt his anger dissolve into overwhelming sadness. The secret had hurt him deeply, but standing before him wasn't a selfish woman trying to manipulate him. She was a mother who had spent years carrying grief, guilt, loneliness, and fear all at once. Every unexplained weekend suddenly made perfect sense. Every emotional glance toward children, every anonymous donation, every quiet tear she believed no one noticed, it all belonged to the same heartbreaking story. Without saying another word, Adrian asked Nora if they could visit Eliana together. Inside the rehabilitation center, colorful paintings covered the walls while children laughed during afternoon activities. Nurses greeted Nora warmly, clearly recognizing her as someone who never missed a visit. Eliana sat at a small table painting bright yellow butterflies. When Nora introduced Adrian as someone very special to her, the little girl smiled shyly before proudly showing him her artwork. She spoke about her favorite books, her dream of becoming a veterinarian, and how she loved watching birds outside her bedroom window every morning. There wasn't a trace of self-pity in her. Despite years of treatment, she radiated hope that many healthy adults struggle to find. As Adrian listened, something inside him quietly changed. He realized that love wasn't being tested because Nora had a daughter. It was being tested because life had placed impossible burdens on someone who had faced them completely alone. She hadn't hidden Eliana because she was ashamed of being a mother. She hid the truth because she believed no one would willingly choose a future filled with uncertainty. On the drive home, neither of them spoke much. They simply watched the countryside roll past beneath the golden afternoon sun. Eventually Adrian reached across the center console and gently held Nora's trembling hand. For the first time that day, she allowed herself to cry without trying to hide her tears. The weeks that followed were unlike anything either of them expected. Wedding planning suddenly seemed far less important than rebuilding trust. Adrian admitted how deeply the secret had wounded him, while Nora answered every difficult question honestly, refusing to hide anything else. Their conversations lasted late into the night, sometimes ending in tears, sometimes ending in quiet smiles, but always ending with greater understanding than the day before. Instead of canceling the wedding, they made one meaningful change. They asked the rehabilitation center whether Eliana would be healthy enough to attend for a few hours. After careful evaluation, the doctors agreed. 3 weeks later, beneath bright blue skies and surrounded by family and close friends, Adrian waited at the end of the aisle. Nora walked toward him wearing a simple white dress, but the moment that filled everyone's eyes with tears came just behind her. Wearing a tiny cream-colored dress and carrying a basket of white flower petals, Eliana slowly walked down the aisle with the biggest smile anyone had ever seen. Every guest stood to their feet, not because it was tradition, but because they understood they were witnessing something far more meaningful than a wedding. They were watching a family become whole. When Adrian made his vows, he silently promised himself that he would never allow Eliana or Nora to carry their burdens alone again. Love, he realized, wasn't measured by perfect beginnings. It was measured by the willingness to stay when life revealed its hardest truths. Years later, people often asked Adrian what changed his life the most. Many expected him to mention his wedding day or his successful career. Instead, he always thought back to that dusty envelope hidden inside an old wooden desk. The secret inside had nearly destroyed the future he imagined, but it also revealed a far greater truth. Sometimes the people we love hide their deepest wounds not because they don't trust us, but because they fear losing the only happiness they've found after surviving unimaginable pain. Before we reach the end, we'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment with the words, "Love chooses compassion." Your comment helps spread kindness and reminds others that understanding can heal even the deepest scars. As the years passed, Eliana's health slowly improved. Treatments that once seemed impossible began showing remarkable results. She eventually returned home permanently, filling their house with laughter, school projects, birthday celebrations, and the joyful chaos only a child can bring. Adrian never considered her someone else's daughter. From the day he chose to stay, she became his family in every way that truly mattered. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who believes in forgiveness and unconditional love, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Tales Maybe for more emotional stories that remind us that the greatest relationships are not built on perfect lives, but on honest hearts willing to love through every storm. Love does not ask whether someone's past is flawless. Love asks whether two hearts are brave enough to walk into tomorrow together. And sometimes, the biggest secret isn't the end of a love story, it is the very reason that love becomes stronger than either person ever believed possible.